Well, welcome back, Anne.
Thank you, Julie.
Today, let's talk about life skills and becoming independent. And let's say you're going to be leaving the nest, leaving home, leaving college, and getting your first job. What do you need to be prepared for? Do you need a resume? Do people still do resumes these days?
People definitely still do resumes. As a matter of fact, people still do business cards. Even if they have them electronically, they still carry paper ones. And other people can save them electronically, but paper ones still get traded. And I encourage everybody to have a business card. It is if you're looking for a job, a business card is a simple way to hand someone your contact information, and it's one more way that they will not forget you. For instance, my husband has been retired for many years, and the biggest thing for him was all of a sudden he didn't have business cards. And it didn't matter because he didn't have business contacts, but he no longer had a way to hand somebody his phone number or whatever he wanted, email address, if he wanted to buy a car from them or sell a car to them, or he buys and sells things frequently just for entertainment, buy a camper or get some mechanical information or give somebody some information about something. He had no way to communicate with them. And he designed a very simple business card. It's got his name, an email address, and a phone number on it. And, you can put whatever you want on it. You could put a tagline if you're looking for a job. Remember me for your designing needs, or remember me for your marketing needs, or whatever. If whatever it is your degree is in, put a little tagline on there. It's a very simple way to get your name out. And if you can market yourself, it's going to do nothing but benefit you in the long run. As far as a formal resume, yes, you absolutely need to have one. Download a template off of Google and set one up. Most colleges have places that will help you do it. They have job and career advancement centers. Take advantage of those. You, your parents, someone is paying a lot of money for you to get a degree. Go utilize the services. They're there for that. The single biggest drawback to anyone, whether they're coming out of college or out of high school to get a job, is the classic, everyone puts experience wanted on their help wanted ads. And nobody brand new in the market has experience. You do have experience. You have life experience. You have lots of things you've done. I encourage youngsters beginning in 9th grade to volunteer at something, do something outside of school, join clubs in school. Literally, the name of a couple of clubs can show that you have experience participating in things. You don't have to be president of the club. If you can have any title at all, though, it does look good on a resume, and those things help. If you organize a fundraiser, that's a great example. If you organize and chair or run a fundraiser for any group, whether it's cheerleaders or drama club or art club, that, my friend, is a skill right there that people want to know about. If you routinely summarize things and teach your classmates or help other people with math or science or something like that, then call yourself a tutor and put it on your resume, because that's what you're doing. And those are the kind of things that college centers are well fitted out to help you come up with, because you have done things. Even if you've not been paid for them, it doesn't mean you have to be paid. But there are many, many things you can do. Getting a job is an outstanding thing to do while you're in high school, and I highly recommend it. But even if you graduate from college with no work experience, which is very unusual these days, there are still many, many things you can put on a resume. And having the resume itself is only the first step. Simply sitting in a waiting room for a job interview, once you actually get an interview, then even if they've not asked for a resume, the application itself is going to ask what you've done in the past. And you can simply say, college student, I've done nothing. Or you can put, well, I tutored kids in math. I've raised money for scholastic groups taking educational trips. If the cheerleaders want to go to a football game or something, there's any number of things. And it's all on how you phrase it. It's all experience. Use everything you do.
When you were in the interview, What are some tips, or how should you be conducting yourself, or what should you be prepared for?
I could probably go on forever just because, if nothing else, I've interviewed countless people. Make sure that you speak to the interviewer like you would speak to your English teacher or your grandmother. Any type of slang or casual conversation, leave your ain't and don't got. Particularly in the South, those are very common casual ways for even educated people to speak. That is not how you speak in an interview. I don't care if you are interviewing for a job as a dirt hauler. Believe me, if it's down to two people and one of them speaks proper English and the other one doesn't, and there's not much difference other than that, I know who's going to get the job. You need to be able to speak correctly. You need to make eye contact. Look at somebody. When you walk in, know how to shake their hand. If you are a man, a boy, if you are at the male gender, learn how to shake a woman's hand and not come off like a limp fish. If the woman is in the hiring position and you walk in there and limp wrist her, is what I call it, shake hands like they're grabbing a dead fish, you just lost the job, buddy, with 9/10 of the women in an interviewing position. Shake their hand just like you're going to shake a man's. And if you find yourself shaking a man's hand, man to man, and you're trying to see who has the most powerful grip, you're not doing that right either. Get somebody to teach you how to do it. It's a social skill. In the United States of America, it's a important social skill for job interviews. Look people in the eye, shake their hand, introduce yourself. If your name is at all difficult to pronounce or can be misinterpreted, my last name is Kinder. Everybody wants to say Kinder. Once upon a time, my name was Sweatman, S-W-E-A-T. Nobody says sweat. Everybody looks at sweat and says sweet. So tell somebody, I don't care if it's John Smith, say it clearly. Once you sit down, or before you sit down, you might offer them a copy of your resume. Would you like a copy for the interview? And they may or may not accept it. They generally will. When you print your resume, print it on heavier paper. Don't use the same paper that you run copies with at school or at Kinko's or wherever. If at all possible, choose a slightly off-white color. These are funny little tips from somebody that's interviewed a lot of people. Plain white copy paper is not going to stand out. It's going to look exactly like every other resume. And again, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be applying for a job as head of an accounting firm to do this. If you're applying for an hourly wage job somewhere, have something prepared on paper you can buy at the dollar store that is heavier than the standard 100-pound or whatever it is copy paper, and have an off-white. Don't do a color. Don't do purple or pink. They don't want you to be, they're not looking for your personality in your resume. They're looking for facts. But there are still ways to make it look professional, and that's what you want to do. Stick with an off-white or what they call ecru, as I was trained in the old days.
How important is networking, either before applying for a job or after you get a job?
That's a phenomenal question. And too often people are like, networking? I'm not even a member of a group anywhere. How am I going to network? Or what can I do? And there are so many things. Networking, you don't have to be a member of a networking club to network. Networking should be a natural extension of who you are and who you encounter on a daily basis. Everybody has a group of people that they influence, and sometimes it's a couple of your friends. Well, your friends have families. If they're close friends, you've met most of their family. Make sure that everybody in your immediate circle knows that you are searching for a job in a certain area, and these are kind of your minimum requirements. And discuss it with people. Tell people if you can't come into town without making a lot of noise and get any attention or something like that. People need to know what you're doing. That's networking, my friend, is telling people what you are doing. Don't bore them to death with it. Tell them you're looking for a job and hand them one of your business cards that you have made. And I call it a business card. A long time ago, it was so common. In the 1800s, everybody over the age of 13 had a calling card. That's exactly what we're talking about. A 22nd century, 21st century, wherever we are, calling card, where somebody like, why do I have this card? Oh, yeah, this is the guy that's looking for a job. And if you have a tagline on there that says, think of me for your marketing needs, then they know exactly what you want a job in. But you'll also find it handy if you are at a social event and some cutie pie across the room won't give you her number, but you'd really like to meet her later. Hand her the card. Say, you know what? I understand that people walk up to you and that there's alcohol involved here tonight and you may not take me seriously. I'd love to take you to coffee sometime. Call me if you're interested. There are endless uses for those business cards. Again, that's networking. That person then knows, call me for your marketing. This guy has kind of a cool job. Even if you don't have the job yet, that's what you're doing.
I think sometimes if you feel like you need to be on the receiving end, you will not extend the invitation. And I think you need to be proactive, invite people, be social. And I guess we could talk about what if you are an introvert and you may not have exceptional confidence in yourself or even in your skills yet if you're just starting out. What are some tips there?
First off, the thing I would say most to introverts is that if you do enough of the studies and deep personality studies that different groups have done to determine, who's perfect to work at Google or Amazon or Facebook, or the studies that large companies have done will show you that the people who appear most confident, generally speaking, are the most painfully introverted people you will ever meet. You're talking to one right now. I get terrified before I walk into a group. My kids, when they discovered that at 10 or 11 years old, were like, hey, Mom, you teach. You stand in front of groups all day. You talk to people about money. How can you? It doesn't matter. What you project doesn't have to be what you feel. So my advice to the introverted who believe they come across as introverted or shy is just employ the things I've already told you. First of all, if you have something to hand to somebody, it's a conversation starter. If you have a quote-unquote calling card and you're interested in talking to them, lead with the card. Go, you know what, I had these made up and I would love to buy you coffee sometime and pick your brain about whatever it is you do for a living. I may not ever want to do that, but I'm trying to learn as much about different kinds of occupations and things as I can right now. Seniors in high school and college ought to be required to do that. Hand a card to a total stranger if you will. Be careful and meet them in public. Follow all the basic rules of safety. But by all means, it doesn't matter how shy you are. It's not hard to, if you can maintain a conversation with anybody, for your second sentence to be, you're a paramedic with Fort Smith EMS. Can I give you my card? I'd love to learn more about that. If you have a minute, I would love to buy you coffee. Yes, a lot of people don't buy coffee. You can substitute Coke, whatever the current slang is in your generation and your time. As a matter of fact, coffee could be an outrageously expensive interview with somebody if you're not careful. Stick with Coca-Cola. But either way, it doesn't matter. Don't look at it as you have to begin a conversation in depth. Look at it as the more times I ask somebody to sit down and talk to me, the bigger chance I have of getting a job that I love. And it doesn't have to be, they may not be looking, but the more people you talk to, the more people you're going to run into that know somebody that's hiring. And probably the older they are, the better chance they have.
Do you recommend any books? Like, I'm thinking of one like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Are there books similar to that?
Actually, those are good. The Covey books about the business books, which I'm not sure if that was one of them, but there are different things. If you like to read, if you don't like to read, go on YouTube. Go to TED Talks and find motivational speeches for job hunters. There's so many ways. And remember, if you can't find it, you're not using the right phrase. Everything's about keywords now. And if you don't put the right keyword in whatever you're searching, and some search engines are just horrible. My search engine for my personal workplace, and I work for a very large organization, the search engine is abysmal. You never know what to put in. But if you're using a respectable one, Google, for instance, you put something in, you're going to get an answer. Find it. You go on YouTube, find it. You don't have to read if you don't like to read. If you do like to read, then I encourage you to make a habit of having one book that's going to make you better at something while you're reading science fiction or historical fiction or biographies. And actually, biographies can fill both. Get a biography of Bill Gates or Elon Musk or George Washington, which also gives you a lot more to talk about in an interview.
So let's say they liked you. You sailed through the interview. They looked at your resume, thought you were qualified, liked your personality, liked that you were professional in the interview, and you're now on the job. What social skills do you need to be among other coworkers?
I wasn't even aware of, it's interesting that you should ask me this because I recently heard a story that horrified me. And it took place in a local company here, a large company. And a young man took a job with a company with phenomenal future possibilities. And he was one of a team of 3 or 4 guys that would go around and swap equipment, computer equipment and electronics and things in and out for the myriad of employees that this company has. And this is an amiable, likable, professional young man, educated, hard worker. And he was working with a guy that had zero ability to read social cues. And he also coupled that with an incredibly short fuse and anger issues. And at one point, this likable young man went one step too far, and the guy just decked him. They were at work, just decked him. Now, to compound matters, when it was investigated, the man lied through his teeth and realized I heard the story from the young man. I'm fully aware of the fact that I didn't have both sides of the story. But the older man wasn't fired. Neither one of them were. And there was I think he was suspended without pay for 2 or 3 days or something. But make sure you know how to read social cues, and make sure that if something does come up with a coworker, you don't resort to tattling on whoever's immediately your superior. That's just immature. Go to the person first. And if it's a serious thing, document what you do. If you keep a running diary of, if you're having issues, you need to keep a running diary of when things happen and what exactly is going on. In larger companies, there are people you can go to with that and say, I don't know what to do. How do I handle this? And personnel people are trained to help you with that. Human resources. Everybody has cute names for departments now. The people group is what some big company calls it. So wherever that is. Or ask people you respect outside of your job. Your parents may be successful business people in whatever they do, or any other person that has a little more years under their belt than you do. I don't know how to handle this. What do I do? Go get help. You never have to create answers on your own. And I'm not a fan of what they call reinventing the wheel. Whatever problem you have in your job, whether you are having trouble getting along with someone or seem to get passed over for promotion repeatedly or never get asked to do the extra stuff that everybody else seems to get, somebody else has done that, been there and done that. Get advice from those people.
Do you want to talk about work ethic?
Work ethic? Mm-hmm. Probably if I could go back and raise my children over again, who, by the way, have phenomenal work ethics, and I'm very proud of them, but if you instill nothing else in your child, I'm speaking to every parent out there, from conception forward, you need to instill a work ethic in your children. An employer given a choice between work ethic and experience if the work ethic is demonstrable, they have any knowledge that it comes with this package of this human that they're interviewing, any employer, almost regardless of the job, will hire a work ethic over experience. A good example would be you don't require a license, or you don't have a license required for a certain job, but the license can be obtained within a few months. I'm not talking about like your job requires an accounting degree or a CPA. If it requires a CPA, nobody's going to do that in a few months. Not possible. But if it requires a license of some sort that you can study and get, then all you have to do is convince the people that, number one, you're willing to put the work in to get the license, you'll get it in record time, and that once you get the license, that you're the right person for the job, and that you will be there. And this is my first advice for anybody starting a job. Get there in the morning before anybody else does. Make the coffee. Get there and make sure you have made the coffee and turned the lights on. If you learn how to do that, you don't have to drink coffee for that. All of a sudden, people think, "Oh, John's here, and John's here. I can tell because the coffee's already made." And then be sure you're at your desk when they leave. You may have to go somewhere during the day, but you be at your desk when everybody else leaves. You only have to do that for weeks or a few months at most. It's a little shortcut trick, because for the rest of your life at that particular company, everybody's going to know that you're the guy that comes in first and leaves last. Even if after a year you're taking half days off to go play golf, you're still the guy that comes in first and makes the coffee, because that's how you established yourself there. Again, what making the coffee in the morning and you being the one to lock up at night, what that shows in anybody's eyes is work ethic. Not that you don't know how to get things done and it takes you forever. It shows how hard you're working to some extent. If they see, another thing would be, don't ever let anybody, not the person emptying the garbage, not the housekeeping crew that comes through to clean your office, don't let anybody see you on Facebook or Amazon or anything other than your business-related software during the day. Not on your phone, not on your computer, not on the telephone in a conversation. And I would emphasize, if you are in a position of power and you have your own assistant and or secretary, you don't let them see you that way, because they immediately assume it's okay and that you're really not working that hard anyway.
So always be setting an example.
Always.
No matter if you're on the bottom rung or at the top.
That's right. I heard somebody one time say they were walking into a building. I don't know where I heard the story. Walking into a building with a brand new employee of a week or two maybe. And the employee spotted a piece of trash in the company's front lawn, and just without thinking while he was talking, walked a few steps out of his way, leaned it over and picked it up and kept walking with his superior and never even said anything, just picked it up and then dropped it in the trash can. He said, in that minute, I knew that employee viewed the grounds of this office and company as his own, and that he needed that was his attitude, as opposed to somebody that would just walk by it and not pay attention. And that taking ownership in your surroundings and in pride in what you do is really evident to people who have the ability to promote you and make your life easier or more fun.
So what would be some best practices? Say you had an entry-level job and you were still actively pursuing bettering yourself, and you have been going on interviews and you have been offered a new job. How do you handle it with your new employer, and how do you handle it with your current employer? How do you exit with grace? And what is the time period that you should give?
The minimum time period to move from any job, and it's if you're stocking goods at Walmart, the minimum is 2 weeks. If you've been with an employer, I've read this, longer than 5 or 10 years, it's extremely considerate to offer more than 2 weeks. 30 days is the absolute maximum, probably, that anybody would require or desire. I know a gentleman who once gave a full year, and they hired somebody about 4 days before he left. So giving it way in advance is not always advantageous. As far as how you exit, and this is so difficult to remember, when you're leaving a job for another one, you're generally doing it because some part of the job did not sit well with you, or some relationship in the environment wasn't particularly harmonious, and you were uncomfortable. You don't leave a job that you love every minute of every day. Also, most people don't have jobs they love every minute of every day. But if it's bad enough for you to leave, leaving is not the time to try to fix it. Leaving is not the time that you write your immediate superior a resignation letter citing every problem with the company, or indeed citing any problem with the company. It's not the time. If you couldn't address those issues while you were there and resolve them to some extent, you're certainly not going to do it in your resignation letter. If they want your input, and many companies do, they will do exit interviews. That is the time and place to address any issues you may have had. If the company or the individual you're working for does not conduct an exit interview, they're not looking for your input. Write a simple resignation letter, have it in your hand, go to your whoever you need to speak with, your superior, and explain to them that you've had a phenomenal opportunity come along. You don't feel like you can pass it up. You're so excited. You've enjoyed your time there. You've learned so much. Here's my letter. Please tell me what I can do to make it easier for you over the next couple of weeks to replace me. Period. Don't burn any bridges. You will never, even if you think you never need them, the world is a very small place. Do not burn a bridge.
So when you go to your new job, you should not talk bad either about your previous employer.
Absolutely.
So now you have a fabulous job, and you've also received maybe a fabulous paycheck. How do you set up a budget? What should your goals be? What should be considered in the budget? Just start with the basics.
The basics. First of all, you should have a budget long before you get to your first job interview. You should have a budget with whatever you're spending in high school, even if you're spending your parents' money. And out of that budget, you need to remember the basics. A minimum, absolute minimum of 10% needs to go to savings, always. If you are paid $1 cash, a dime goes in your piggy bank. An additional dime goes somewhere for something that you believe in. These are just basic budgeting rules. It can go to your church if you go to a church. It can go to whatever you believe in. If you should stand for something as a person. And if you stand for something, you need to put your money where your mouth is. Whether it is curing cancer or Alzheimer's disease, or providing homes or food for needy children, take your choice, but choose something. And out of every dollar you earn, a dime goes to your personal savings, minimum. A dime goes to some cause you believe in. Keep it and then give it at the appropriate time. Once you're done with that 20 cents, then you're working with whatever's left after the government gets through with it. Typically, you're going to be working with about 60% of your gross pay. Between 50 and 60% is the norm after you have taxes, savings, etc. You need to remember that if you're making $24,000 a year, because that's easy math, then you really only have $1,000 a month to work with. And you need to remember that and not go get a $900 a month apartment. There are lots of guidelines out there, if you don't already have them. If you're providing your own housing, you don't ever want all of your set expenses, your cell phone, your apartment, your utilities, your gasoline. You don't want those to ever exceed preferably 39%. 40 is easier to remember. But if you've only got 50% of your income and 40% of your income is going for housing and transportation, that's not a lot left for food, folks, much less medical care or new clothes or anything else. So be very careful. Be mindful of what you actually have to work with, not what you're being paid, and what you have to pay for. If you've never before paid for those things, you need to make some phone calls. Where do some of your friends live? Would you like to live there? Ask them what they're paying in rent. And remember, there are a lot of alternatives. There's roommates. There are all kinds of things that you can do to provide alternatives for different things.
You said start a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a checking account.
No.
It's not a debit card account. It is a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
How would you go about what is required to open up a savings account?
Very little is
Normally.
actually required. As a matter of fact, there are places all over right now. I get an ad for one almost daily that if you will go with your child to start a savings account, that this particular institution will give the child I think it's like $50. To me, it was a phenomenally large amount of money.
Free money.
Yeah. Who wouldn't go start that savings account? Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of ways to do that. But you brought up an important thing about the debit card. A savings account should never have a debit card associated with it. Savings is not something you withdraw on a whim. Savings is not something you withdraw because you see something on sale that you've been looking for a long, long time and you don't have the other money to buy it with. If you want it badly enough, budget for it out of the part of your cash you use. Savings is for a lot of things. Everybody needs to have eventually $3,000 to $5,000 in savings that they can keep throughout their lifetime. They always need to have that much. Anybody that has ever bought a set of tires knows you're going to be out $1,000. If you don't have that cash sitting in savings, the only way for you to get new tires, and by the way, people, you don't get to pick when you need new tires. You know it's coming, but when it comes, it's not something you can put off. If you need new tires and they cost $1,000, as most of them do, then your only choice is to finance it through the tire company if you can't afford it yourself. At that point, you're at the mercy of the tire company. And if the tires cost $1,000 new, they're going to cost you $2,000 or $3,000 if you buy them through the finance company. So be careful how you conduct yourself. Make sure before you put yourself in a position of paying for your own life that you at least have a cushion to do some of it with, because if you get caught in 25 to 35% interest deals like tire financing, you're going to be paying astronomical amounts of your income to people you don't know for things you didn't even want.
I think you also have to be cautious of online streaming subscriptions. Little things like that
Very
can
much
add
so.
up. All the little perks of like $2.99 a month
Mm-hmm.
that can really accumulate and take a whack out of a paycheck.
They do. And it's very easy to get, you're right, it's very easy to get caught up in them. There is a gentleman online, not online, on TV, actually. He's on Good Morning America, but he's other places as well. I've heard him on the radio. And I forget his first name. His last name is Rosson, Rosson, I believe. And he does something called Rosson Reports. And they are phenomenally helpful. I would encourage anybody to go to his website. And one of the many helpful things he has on there are, he did one whole episode on companies that will, for free, scan your accounts and they'll need access. So don't do this to just anybody that offers, but his are very carefully verified and safe and secure. And they will go through to see which ones, if say you have a $2.99 account to download some music somewhere, but you also have a Spotify account or an Amazon account, the services will point out duplications. They will point out apps that you are paying for that are not being used on your phone, a variety of things like that. And those services are free. And sometimes they want something from you, there's no doubt. Mm-hmm. But they're well worth looking into and something I've personally been meaning to download and haven't done. So, and I encourage everybody to do it for just that reason.
And even food delivery fees to your house. And there's the delivery fee, there's the added fee for the convenience of them doing it. And
Yes. Yes,
know.
we've come a long way from Pizza Hut and Domino's used to be like the few people that delivered, and they would deliver for whatever their menu prices were, plus maybe a $5 delivery fee. And those days are long gone. The current devotion to the delivery services, everything from Uber to DoorDash to everything that brings food to your door, it's not the same. It's far more expensive now than it used to be as far as the add-ons. If you want food from a restaurant, go pick it up if you don't want to eat it there. If you want to do that once a month, it's probably not going to be a stupid financial move. If you're doing it once a week, unless you are incredibly wealthy and have so much discretionary income that it doesn't matter, then you're probably making a financial mistake. The additional fees for food delivered to your door, and people do it with the best of intentions. They are either typically single and just don't want to get out, or maybe don't have reliable transportation, or gasoline is simply too expensive. Then get a crock pot or learn to make something basic. Have your main meal while you're out during the day, if that's possible, and then have a sandwich at night. Do something so you're not using the delivery services. I frequently counsel people financially, and the one thing I have them do is every receipt that they get from any sort of food delivery or drive-through throughout a 30-day period, they're supposed to put in the console of their car and then bring it to me at the end of the month. That's for a drive-through coffee, a run to the Sonic, grab a burger for lunch, toss a Happy Meal in the back seat on the way home to the kids. And invariably, not one single person has ever had any idea how much they actually spent on that, and they're shocked.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you have seen people make when they come to you?
The biggest mistakes and the most damaging generally have to do with credit cards, closely followed by irresponsible use of their own resources as far as cash. You bleed off cash at all day long that you don't pay attention to. The first thing I would say, and it addresses both issues, is you need to find out what a zero-based budget is and strive for one. That simply means that if you have that $2,000 a month that you're being paid and you know that $1,000 of it goes in your checking account, you need to know before every month starts exactly what money has to go out. Those come first: your food, your housing, your transportation, and your insurance that cover important things. I'm not talking about insurance on your ski boat. I'm talking about you have to have your home and your health insured and your vehicle. Once you have those expenses covered, you look at what's left, and that's what gets divided up for your grocery bill and your run to the doctor or your entertainment. If there's any money left over after that, that's what gets to go to restaurants and places like that and entertainment. And you should always have that budgeted. If it's only $5 a week, you have to have some sort of spending money budgeted, because in today's society, it's difficult to function without ever going anywhere. So you need something. But you have to budget realistically. You take the required expenditures out first, and then one way to take care of it is every time you get paid, you know exactly how much is going to come out for your car, your house, your insurance. You know those bills already. Take everything else out in cash. Put it in 4 envelopes, one for each week of the month, and don't touch any envelope ahead of time. That's one way to start.
Is there a difference between having a savings account and an emergency fund?
An emergency fund comes before a savings account.
Okay.
You have to have an emergency fund. And the reason is if you establish a savings account and you have $800 in it, immediately you're going to lose brakes, transmission, or tires on your car. And it's going to wipe your savings account out. So it's easier just to finance it. And you get caught in a vicious cycle. If you make minimum payments, it will take 10 years to pay off that set of tires. In the meantime, you will have gone through a dozen other sets of tires. I mean, you could spend the rest of your life just paying for tires. Don't do that. A savings account comes after. An emergency fund will give you the ability to go through life. A savings account gives you the ability to go through life doing things you want to do.
Let's talk about credit cards and building credit. Let's talk about building credit first. What are some best practices to do that?
Probably the best way that I've seen is for you to go to I'd start with your personal bank, wherever you have funds or a checking account, and ask if they will issue you a MasterCard or a Visa. They may or may not do that. If they balk because you have no credit history and they don't want to issue a MasterCard or a Visa, which you have your debit card, which generally will carry a Visa logo, but that doesn't establish credit history. Tell them, I would like to establish some credit. And often they will say, if you'll give us a $100 deposit, or sometimes it's more than that, then we will give you a $100 line of credit, and you can pay it off, and they keep your $100 deposit in reserve in case you don't make the payments. If your bank doesn't want to do it, there are a myriad online of what they call secured credit cards, which is what that is. Start with a secured card and build your credit. If you miss a payment, you have just destroyed yourself for a couple of years. Don't be late, ever. The minute you get a credit card, always set the minimum payment up on an automatic draft out of your checking account. And then when you look at your paycheck each month, you know that $30 is going to Home Depot or wherever, or Capital One, because they do a lot of secured cards. And that is just the minimum. If that is all you pay, you will never, ever pay off that credit card. Never do a minimum payment. That is simply to keep you from ever being late. Always pay the card off in full every month. If you can't, then you bought too much on the card. If you cannot pay it off, there are very few exceptions to that rule. About the only exception is a home mortgage. No, we don't expect you to pay cash for that. There are ways to pay cash for cars and take a step up on every car. You could buy a new car every year. You start with a $500 car, drive it for a year and save $1,000. Sell it for $300 and get a $1,300 car. There are ways to do that, and in 7 or 8 years, you can drive a $30,000 car that way.
So your payment to the credit card company should be part of your budget?
Yes, 100%, yes.
So if you've used your credit card for your food, that is like your food budget?
That is your food budget. That doesn't mean you have free money to spend on food. It doesn't mean you have free money to go to the club or go bowling. It means that you're using the credit card to establish your credit. You're not using the credit card to extend your buying power. And the same goes for financing things. Don't finance things just to make them possible for you to buy sooner than you can save the money. If you finance something, the only exception might be if somebody offers you a completely interest-free period of, say, a year to buy something, and if you pay it off in less than a year, you don't ever owe any interest. Well, first of all, they've built some interest in, because nobody gives away free money. If you pay cash, it will be cheaper, I promise. But under those circumstances, if it's something you need for business or school or something like that, then there are exceptions to be made. A minimum payment is exactly that. It's not the payment you're supposed to make. It's the payment you have to make, or you will be in bad trouble. You impact the cost of everything from insurance, car insurance. So many things are based on your credit now. Minimum payments are a nightmare. The corollary to that is don't ever buy anything because you can afford the payment. Don't buy a $500,000 house instead of a $300,000 house because you can afford the payment. Look ultimately at how much it's going to cost you, and is that a reasonable amount of money for you to pay for a house? A $300,000 house will easily cost you the better part of $1 million if you pay it out over 30 years. A $500,000 house will cost you more like $2 million. Don't finance anything longer than you have to. Pay things off as quickly as possible, regardless of what the payment is. If you have a $300 car payment, pay $500 a month. Get it paid off.
Do more when you can.
Yes.
You mentioned that your credit rating affected more than just future credit.
Yes.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Your credit rating affects your ability to get an apartment. If you spend your high school or college years taking advantage of the free credit cards that people send you because they know you're getting ready to graduate from high school or college, if you take that $100, $300, $500 limit and think somebody's just sent you free money, then you will find, much to your dismay, once you graduate and go try to find an apartment, that the very first thing the landlord's going to do is run your credit. If you haven't paid that bill, then you won't have a place to live. It's that simple. Home and car insurance, as soon as you begin paying your own insurance, exact same thing. The premiums are all geared to your payment ability. And your payment ability is demonstrated not by how much you make, it's demonstrated by your past payment history.
Are you comfortable about talking about student debt, student
Sure.
loan debt? If you have graduated and you are now obligated to pay that back, what are some best practices?
Student loans are an interesting anomaly, and they're uniquely American, unfortunately. They generally carry fairly low interest rates compared to other financing in the world, whereas a credit card or line of credit that you may have taken out to purchase furniture is going to be 25 to 35% interest. A student loan might be lower than 5%. They tend to be extremely reasonable, because they want you to pay them, and the payments tend to be lower. Once you mess up the payments, you will get shifted to a second-tier lender. And whether you know it or not, your loan's just been handed off from a semi-government supported foundation who could afford to charge you 3% to somebody more closely tied to the private sector who now is going to charge you 10%. And they're going to be much more diligent about collecting it. And should you successfully evade their efforts, it's going to be handed off to land sharks, bottom feeders in the credit industry, who will come after you with everything they've got forever. Student debt is not, it's an unfortunate necessity for many, many, many people. The way increasing costs for universities and colleges are structured, they have to have more money to survive. The only way that they can get it outside of fundraising is through tuition, and they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They have to charge what they have to charge. They also have to collect it, and if they can't, then again, the costs just go up further, and everybody else has to pay your debt off. Not paying bills creates its own set of issues. Some bills will hurt you more than others. Not paying a student loan will hurt you for a very long time. Not paying anything that you pay on what are called installment payments, like a car loan, will hurt you. Not paying a medical bill, while I don't encourage it, typically has the least impact on your credit because they understand that medical care in the United States is very expensive and that many people for better or worse, wind up going to an emergency room for a cold because they can't afford to go to a doctor. Because of that, medical debt's looked at a little differently. But outside of that, if you don't make a payment that you have agreed to make the 15th of every month, you know your car payment's due, that is not a surprise. You miss that payment, then it's going to take you at least 7 years to get over it.
Let's say someone has their in over their head.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start digging out?
The way you start digging out is to go back to basics. You go back to basics and you look at how much money is getting deposited in your checking account from your employment. That's the first thing. That's what you have to live on. That should be your budget. The second thing you look at is there anything that I owe money on that I could return to the person, place, or store and have those payments go away? Is that possible? The third thing to look at is, what can I do for additional cash to get myself out of this mess? Second jobs are a possibility. There are so many legitimate opportunities to work remotely now that it's almost a no-brainer, literally. You can do so many things with a computer at home that it's possible to earn extra income with. Other than, and immediately upon the idea of extra income comes, you need to look around you. Are you in this situation because you've bought too much stuff? Does that stuff really make you happy on a day-to-day basis? What's the Marie Kondo? Does it bring you joy? Mm-hmm. I doubt that the 60-inch TV you thought you couldn't live without is really bringing you joy on a regular basis. Use the marketplaces online. Sell things. Do it intelligently. Don't meet people in dark alleys. Meet them at a police station. But no matter how young or vulnerable you might be, there are a lot of safe ways to do that. Unload the, pardon my French, crap that you've piled up. How many cute little things do you have sitting in your closet that still have price tags on them? Get rid of that stuff. And there also, don't overlook the possibility of some type of barter. Those systems still are alive and well. I know professionals that barter frequently. I know a young businessman right here in town who recently had a massive, several $1,000s worth of dental work done. And the dentist did it in exchange for this young man's product that he sells. That kind of thing takes place all the time. And it could be that you could, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be your job. If you're a particularly gifted marketer, or you can set up spreadsheets, or there are just tons of things you could do. And don't be embarrassed to say, I don't have the money for this right now, but these are my skills. Is there anything that I could do to work off a small part of it?
Can anyone not afford to get a credit card?
You mean, do you need a certain income level? No, you don't need a certain income level. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, a lack of a credit score, and I know this because at some point my husband and I were blessed and had paid everything off. We didn't have any credit anywhere. And we were really pleased with ourselves. And I reached a point in my career where I wanted to go independent and rapidly realized that I couldn't even rent an office space. So that was a real interesting opportunity. So I learned in my 50s that it was time to pony up and start over again with credit, not because I needed the credit, but I needed the credit score. So that's unfortunately important until we get a better system. And by definition, people who have less income and fewer choices are going to be hurt the worst by not being able to rent an apartment or being charged extra because the landlord doesn't know if they're going to be able to come up with the payment. Those people are the ones that are going to be hurt the worst. I encourage you to have as much as I loathe the concept of credit, just simply because so many people get lost, and it's the single biggest damaging prospect to people succeeding financially, as well as ever being able to retire, which is what I do for a living. Credit is the biggest thing. Debt is the biggest thing that will stand between you and what you really want to do. It doesn't bring you what you want to do. It prevents what you want to do. So yes, credit scores, unfortunately, are necessary for everybody, but particularly for younger or lower income people who need every break they can get financially because they're penalized for not having it. Save $100, take it somewhere, and get a secured credit card. And use it periodically and pay it in full every month. That's how you get a credit score.
At what age would it be recommended to begin considering preparing for retirement? Saving for retirement?
Absolutely. Well, the longer you save, it goes without saying, the more money you'll have. If you can discipline yourself, and you should, with your very first paycheck, and if your first paycheck is at age 16, then that's when you begin. If you discipline yourself to setting aside, let's say 5%, half your savings that you're saving anyway. If you take 5% at 16 and put that in an IRA, that money will grow. If you put it in a Roth IRA, then it will be basically tax-free income to you after age 59 and a half, as the way it stands right now. Everybody assumes, by the way, that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire, so they used to encourage traditional IRAs for that reason. A Roth, however, provides tax-free income, and in my experience, nobody's tax bracket goes down quite as far as they hoped it would when they retire. We still spend money. If you begin at that age, I've seen an illustration, and I don't have the exact details with me, but two brothers basically began at 18, putting something like, I don't know, $100 a month or $1,000 a month. I don't remember the story. But into a savings account. And at 21, one of the guys met a girl and went off the rails and looked at his savings and decided he was going to buy a car and use the money for a down payment and, did a 10-year loan or whatever and used all his money, and which, of course, then the minute he drove the brand new car off the lot, the depreciation ate up everything he had put into the car anyway. Meanwhile, his friend continued contributing the $100 a month or whatever into his account until once he had $700 or $800, he bought a $700 or $800 car, continued the $100 a month payment. In a year, traded the $800 car for a $4,000 car, and so on and so forth. At 25, one kid is driving the exact same car he bought at 20 with the loan. It's still not paid for. He can't afford the repairs. The next car he buys will have to be financed, and he has no savings, whereas the other kid is driving a brand new, SUV with insurance paid and savings in the bank. So it's hard to say how early to start anything. If you live on everything you have, you will never have anything.
So have discipline, understand that sacrifice equals gains in the long run.
Absolutely. And it doesn't, if you start your first paycheck and you only spend half of what you bring home, again, in the illustration, you're making $2,000, you bring home $1,000. If you're only spending $500 and the other $500 is going to various forms of savings, for savings, an emergency fund, your charitable type contribution, then all of a sudden possibilities open up, always. Because if you have savings and you lose your job, most people are going to have to find a job immediately before their next paycheck would have come in. If you have 1, 2, 3, 6 months of savings for your monthly bills, all of a sudden you get to pick your next job. It's not an emergency. There's no substitute for it at all. Everybody needs it, and you need to start it with your very first paycheck. Try to live on 25% of what you make. You will be able to call your life your own for the rest of your life and do what you want to do. You can travel, you can buy things, you can do whatever you want and never have to pay the piper, the lender.
Perhaps a lot of younger youth or Generation Z or even millennials might compare their living situation to what their parents had acquired. And that's probably in this day and age, probably not a fair comparison. Some would say they have to survive. They're not able to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that mindset? And is that actually just the reality?
The reality is, and I've read many studies that say yes, that the current generation, for instance, so many of them are going back home after getting college degrees because they simply have no choice. Again, there are ways to make money out there legally. I watched a young man start mowing lawns at 14. He grew up, fought going to college because he was making too much money by the time he graduated from high school, went ahead against his wishes and finished his degree in business administration or something to keep his parents happy. And by the time he graduated from college, was buying and selling blocks of yards that he took care of to other services, other landscape services. That same young man now is in his late 30s, has a successful landscaping business and does, landscaping for the city and large commercial projects and everything else. If he could start that at age 14, it's hard for me to believe that somebody with a college degree can't find a way to earn a living. So, yeah, nobody wants to go back home if you've experienced freedom, without question. But look outside the box. There are a lot of ways to earn money that your bachelor's degree in history might not have prepared you for. And I say that with a bachelor's degree. So, in equally useless stuff.
What are some of the biggest life lessons you have learned?
One of the biggest life lessons I learned is that you don't look at your parents growing up and automatically assume that's how you're going to live. I was very blessed. My parents were very blessed financially, and they got a lot of help from their parents, and they were very successful. I grew up sort of with an expectation that I would have a similar house and a similar lifestyle and things like that. I was gifted with a wonderful education, which, by the way, if you're in college, the most valuable thing you're going to walk away from in college, whether you're at the local junior college or a high-end private university, the most valuable thing you're going to walk away with is the relationships you develop there, whether it's with professors, people who work through the university, the landscape guy, or the friends that you can make. Those are the people that will make a difference in your life in the long run. Even if you don't live anywhere near that university, at some point, those relationships will come into play when we had talked about networking. Remember, that is every bit as important as academics. So, lessons learned. You don't assume that when you turn 40, your parents are going to die and leave you a large inheritance that's going to enable you to live just like they did. It doesn't work like that. With any luck, your parents will live into a ripe old age and see their great-grandchildren. And that's what you would probably wish. Regardless of how, of what happens financially with your parents, you need to determine early on that the way you live is going to be the way that you make in your own life. And that was a lesson that it took me a long time. I used my parents and other people that I loved and admired so much as an example in my head. And it was very difficult for me to unwind myself from those expectations for my own life and realize that it really, to be honest, wasn't exactly what I wanted anyway. I didn't, just on one area, I grew up in neighborhoods, nice neighborhoods, but I grew up in neighborhoods around the city and everything. Well, come to find out, what I really like is being out in the country with land around me. So, and it takes a long time to figure those things out. But don't assume, for good or for bad, that whatever family model you grew up in is how you're going to live your own life. It may be very different, and it may be that you want something very different, and that's okay too. Don't tie yourself down with expectations. Learn to live without a safety net, or create your own safety net, even better. That was the biggest one. Create your own safety net. I think I thought I would always have one, and I didn't. And it came as a shock. It's a harsh reality.
At what age approximately were you when you realized, hey, I probably might need to go a different direction?
I was probably well into my 40s before I really realized that there was no magic safety net. And that's the late time. Please, if you're in high school, listen to me now. Work on establishing your safety net first. If you have 6 months of living expenses in the bank, there is nothing that can derail you. I have young clients in their 20s with a year's worth of savings. And that is, take a year off and stay home with a baby if you want to. I mean, whatever your dreams are, take a year off and start your own business. It's incredible. And keep in mind, too, that when you're 18, 22, 25, your living expenses are lower than they're ever going to be. If you can't save a month's worth of living expenses now, then you're sunk when you're 35 with children.
What should you be doing in your, say, 25 or younger? What is most important during those years to live, to experiment with, to save, to be disciplined with? What is the foundation that you should be building on in those years?
The foundation, with hindsight, it's so evident in hindsight. The foundation in those years needs to be twofold. One is financial, which we've been discussing. Mm-hmm. There is nothing in the world that will give you security more than a big savings account. I promise you, I've driven some fancy cars. None of them give you security. Mm-hmm. They give you really big repair bills. The second one is, and it's so hard in your 20s and even early 30s, to ground yourself in who you are, what you believe in, and what you stand for. Those things are very fluid as we grow up. That's part of growing up, is we're still developing what is it that I would really stand and fight for? What is it that would be a deal breaker with someone I thought I was in love with, okay? I remember I went out with a man one time who had children. He was divorced, and he hit one of them one time in front of me. And I informed him on the spot, that's a deal breaker. Long story short, I stayed with him for much longer, and to my knowledge, he never hit the children again. And I think I would have known. So it won't always work out that way. And I would have left if I had ever seen him do it again. Another deal breaker would be if anybody had ever hit me. And I raised 2 daughters, and I guarantee you I ground that into them early on, because I had friends who succumbed to domestic abuse, and they weren't strong enough to get out of it. So that was a deal breaker to me, and I made sure that my girls knew there's no second chances on that. Figure those things out. Make a list of them. What are deal breakers to you? You've got them. Everybody's got them. Whether you're 18, 25, or 35, you've got deal breakers. Figure those things out. Make a list of them. What are deal breakers to you? You've got them. Everybody's got them. Whether you're 18, 25, or 35, you've got deal breakers. Figure those things out. go forward in those and know and be vocal about them. Let people know what you stand up and believe for. If at all possible, explore your spirituality. Make sure that don't accept things at face value. And this goes for politics, religion, referrals to anything, cars, medicine, the next great cure or weight loss. Don't take anything based on what some actor says or what an ad says or what some study says, unless you look at it and you know enough to know whether or not that study has any validity to it or not. Was it a study run by the manufacturer of said product? Probably going to be a little biased. Even if they did a double-blind, 10-year, 5 million person study, somehow there's going to be a way to make it biased. Look for the bias in any information that you get. But at the same time, try to figure out from primary sources, meaning firsthand, primary sources, what it is that you do stand on and believe.
Closing thoughts from you. Anything I didn't ask that you want to add? Or
closing thoughts would be, a lot of money doesn't give you a good life. The things that give you a good life are those things you have to develop early. Your work ethic, your beliefs, and knowing that happiness is not unwrapping a new Mercedes on your birthday. That's unmitigated joy for a while. Believe me, it would be tons of fun. It's not what's going to make you smile when you're falling asleep at night. Not for very long. It might for a while, but not for very long. What are the things that make you feel peaceful when you're falling asleep at night? Or when you're alone somewhere and there's no noise, and what do you think of that makes you happy? What makes you feel like the stress at work is not really going to get you down because these things are in your life? Don't pin it on other people. It's not other people's responsibility to make you happy. What inside of yourself makes you happy? Figure that out and stick with it. When I say the deal breakers in life, know what those are and don't violate them for anybody. Find them. Explore your beliefs in yourself and other people and in what you think is important. And know beyond a shadow of a doubt that no matter how much money you have, it's not going to solve the things that seriously disturb your spirit. That's it.
thank you.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thank you,
Thank you.
Julie.